The bizarre secret, the story of the colonel who bought the slave to marry her, Virginia. United States minus 1,847. Imagine a man willing to destroy his reputation, his fortune, and his future for love in 1847 in slave-owning Virginia. Colonel Nathaniel Whitmore committed the most scandalous act that society had ever witnessed. He bought a slave at a public auction, but not to work on his land. What he did with her afterwards shocked everyone and changed two lives forever. What was the real motive? And what price would they both pay for this forbidden love? This is a story of faith that defied the cruelest chains of history. The April morning carried the scent of magnolias and injustice. In Richmond's Central Square, a crowd of farmers, merchants, and curious onlookers thronged around the wooden platform where the slave auction was taking place. Colonel Nathaniel Whitmore watched the scene from afar, mounted on his bay horse, his heart broken. At 42 years old, Nathaniel was known for three things: his bravery in the war against Mexico, his unwavering Christian devotion, and his refusal to own slaves, even though he owned vast tobacco plantations. This made him a peculiar figure among the Southern aristocracy. $1,200, shouted a fat farmer, waving his hat. On the platform, chained like an animal, was Sarah. Her brown eyes shone not with tears, but with a dignity that cut deeper than any blade. She was 28 years old, with skin the color of polished mahogany and a posture that defied her condition. Nathaniel knew her. He knew her very well. 3 years earlier, on a trip to Charleston, he had met Sarah under extraordinary circumstances. She was working in the home of a Methodist pastor who secretly taught slaves to read and reader. Crime punishable by whipping or death. Nathaniel, attending prayer meetings in that house, had seen Sarah recite entire passages from the Bible from memory, her voice transforming ancient words into living promises. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, she recited, and something in Nathaniel broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. For weeks they talked about faith, about the God who freed captives and broke chains. Sarah spoke of a Jesus she knew more intimately than any theologian Nathaniel had studied in his seminary years. Yes. Before the war, he had considered the pastorate. "The love of Christ knows no chains, Colonel," she had said one night, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. "One day those chains will fall. I have faith in that." But then the pastor was discovered, arrested, convicted, executed. His possessions, including Sarah, were confiscated and put up for sale. $1,400! Another shout from the crowd. Nathaniel closed his eyes and prayed, "Lord, I don't know if this is your will or my folly, but I cannot let her be sold to those men." He knew the buyers. He knew their reputations. He knew what they did to women like Sarah. $2,000. Nathaniel's voice cut through the air like thunder. The crowd turned. Murmurs echoed through the square like wildfire. Colonel Whitmore, the man who preached against slavery? What was he doing there? $2,500? retorted the fat farmer, his face red with anger. $3,000. Nathaniel's voice was firm. Final. Silence. $3,000 was an absurd fortune for a single slave, no matter how skilled she was. Sold to Colonel Whitmore? Nathaniel dismounted from his horse, his boots echoing on the stone floor. He paid in gold, each coin a weight on his conscience. He wasn't buying freedom, he was using the language of oppression to try to subvert it. Did that make him complicit? The question tormented him. When the auctioneer handed over the chain that bound Sarah, Nathaniel looked into her eyes for the first time in 3 years. He saw recognition. He saw fear. He saw hope. "Come," he said softly. "You're safe now." "Safe?" she whispered as he guided her through the hostile crowd. "Or simply in another cage?" The question hung in the air as they made their way to Nathaniel's carriage. The crowd watched them, scandalized. Venomous comments flew like invisible arrows. $3,000 for that black woman? He's lost his mind. They say he's a devout Christian, but look at this, ... double quotes. No man pays that price without having ulterior motives, ... quotes. Nathaniel helped Sarah into the carriage, ignoring the stares. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what he had just done. He had crossed a line he could not undo. The journey to her estate, Graceland Manor, would take 3 hours. The first 30 minutes passed in absolute silence. Sarah kept her gaze fixed out the window, observing the landscape of green fields and blue skies, a cruel beauty that contrasted sharply with the darkness of slavery. You must be wondering what I intend to do. Nathaniel finally broke the silence, his words carefully chosen. Sarah turned slowly to face him. I've learned not to ask questions, Colonel. The answers usually bring more pain. I'm not like the others, Sarah. You know that? Do I know? Her voice carried 3 years of suffering. After Reverend Patterson was hanged, I was sold 4 times. 4 times, Colonel. Each man who bought me said he was different. Each one promised me something better. Each one lied. The pain in her voice pierced Nathaniel's heart like a spear. He wanted to ask what she had suffered, but the recent marks on her wrists already told enough stories. I'm not going to keep her as a slave, he said, his voice firm. But I need you to trust me. What I've planned is dangerous for both of us. Sarah laughed, sound devoid of joy. Dangerous for the respected colonel? Or dangerous for the slave who has nothing to lose but a life that is already worthless? Your life is worth everything, Sarah. In God's eyes, you are as precious as anyone else. Fine words, Colonel. Reverend Patterson also had fine words. They didn't save him from the gallows. Nathaniel swallowed hard. She was right to be cynical. Faith without action was dead. He had preached this countless times in the secret services he held on his property, where slaves from neighboring farms came to hear the gospel of freedom. When we get to Graceland, he said, I'll give you a room in the main house, not in the slave quarters. You'll have proper clothes, food from my table, and freedom to come and go around the property. And what do you expect in return? Sarah asked, her voice sharp as glass. Every man expects something. Nathaniel felt the blood rush to his face. I expect your help to deceive my own society. I expect your courage to participate in a plan that could destroy us or liberate us. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What plan? I'm going to ask for your hand in marriage. The silence that followed was so dense, it seemed to suck the air out of the carriage. Sarah turned pale, then red, then pale again. You've completely lost your mind, she whispered. Marriage between whites and blacks is forbidden throughout Virginia. They'd hang us both. Not if nobody knows the truth, Nathaniel replied, pulling an envelope from his inside coat pocket. I have here forged documents. They cost a fortune and the help of abolitionists in the North. According to these papers, you are Sarah Claremont, daughter of a French merchant and a woman from New Orleans of Creole descent. Your skin could pass for Mediterranean, especially if we use the right clothes and the right story. Sarah held the envelope with trembling hands. This is madness. A lie, a sin. It's about survival, Nathaniel countered, and perhaps it's about justice. If God can transform injustice into redemption, then we can use the tools of the oppressors against them. And if they find out, they'll sell me again. As for you, they'll hang you for treason against the race. That's why I need to know if you want this. If you have enough faith to take this leap. Nathaniel leaned forward, his intense blue eyes fixed on her. Sarah, for the past 3 years, there hasn't been a day I haven't prayed for you. Not a day I haven't searched for a way to find you. When I heard about the auction, I saw the hand of God opening an impossible door. Or the devil's hand tempting us both, she murmured. Maybe, but I'd rather risk my life trying to do the right thing than live a safe life doing nothing. Sarah looked out the window again. Tobacco fields stretched as far as the eye could see, fields worked by chained men and women, bent over under the relentless sun. She had been one of them. She could be again. Why me? She finally asked. Of all the people you could save, why me? Nathaniel hesitated. It was the question he dreaded because the answer revealed more than it should. Because when I heard you recite Psalms in that house in Charleston, he said slowly, for the first time in my life, I understood what it means to hunger and thirst for righteousness. Your faith taught me more about God than all the sermons I've ever heard. And because ... double quotes, he paused, struggling with words that were too dangerous to say aloud. And why? Sarah pressed. Because I fell in love with your soul before I allowed myself to see your face. The air in the carriage became electrically charged. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. The first real tears in 3 years. Not tears of pain, but of something she had thought was dead inside her. Hope. If we do this, she said, her voice barely a whisper, there's no going back. For any of us. I know. They will destroy us if they find out. I know. You will lose everything. Your position, your land, your name. Material things aren't everything, Sarah. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Sarah closed her eyes. In her mind, prayers and fears battled like titans. She thought of Reverend Patterson, hanged for teaching slaves to read. She thought of her mother, sold when she was 7, never seen again. She thought of every lash, every humiliation, every moment her humanity was denied. And he thought of a God who had promised freedom to the captives. All right, she finally said, opening her eyes to meet Nathaniel's. I'll do it. But not out of love. I still don't know if I can love any man after what I've been through. I'll do it out of faith. Faith that God can use even our lies to reveal a greater truth. Nathaniel nodded, respecting her honesty. That's all I ask. And one more condition, Sarah added, her voice gaining strength. If we're going to do this, it won't just be to save me. Your property, you said you don't own slaves? I hire free workers. I pay fair wages. Then we will use our position to help others. We will find ways to buy more people and free them. We will make this marriage a weapon against the system. A slow smile spread across Nathaniel's face. You are extraordinary, Sarah Claremont. For the first time, she smiled back. A small, cautious, but genuine smile. I'm not Sarah Claremont yet, Colonel. Nathaniel, he corrected. If we're going to get married, you should call me by my first name, Nathaniel. She tested the word strange in her language. And now we prepare. I have friends who will help is abolitionists, Quakers, even some courageous pastors. We will need time to establish your new identity, teach you the customs of society, and create a compelling story. How long? 3 months, maybe 6. And in the meantime, you live in my house as ... a housekeeper. It's a story people will accept. An educated Creole woman coming to organize my disorganized bachelor pad. Sarah nodded slowly, processing the absurd and audacious plan. It was madness. It was dangerous. It was impossible. It was also the only chance of freedom she would have. The carriage turned onto a road lined with oak trees covered in Spanish moss. In the distance, Sarah saw a large white house with imposing columns. Graceland Manor, her new cage, or her new life. She touched the envelope containing the forged documents, feeling the weight of the paper between her fingers. Sarah Claremont. A stolen identity to replace a stolen identity. She had been born Sarah, just Sarah, no surname because slaves were not entitled to family names. Nathaniel, she said when the carriage stopped, one last question. Try? Do you really believe that God approves of this? All these lies? Nathaniel looked at his hands that had killed men in war, hands that had just paid $3,000 for a human being. I don't know, he admitted, but I believe in a God who turned water into wine, who saved prostitutes and dined with sinners. A God who breaks rules when rules break people. So yes, Sarah, I believe he understands. Sarah stepped down from the carriage, her legs trembling. 2 black, servants-free laborers, she noted with surprise by the wages and decent clothes, rushed to help with the non-existent luggage. Welcome to Graceland, Ms., one of them said respectfully. Ms. The word was strange, new, impossible. Sarah Claremont. She would have to become someone else to become herself. What a cruel and necessary game this was. As she crossed the threshold of the house, Sarah whispered a prayer. Lord, if this is your way, make it straight. If not, close this door before it destroys us. But the door remained open, and beyond it he awaited an uncertain future, full of danger, lies, and a stubborn hope that refused to die. The first few days at Graceland were a chilling revelation. Sarah discovered that Nathaniel hadn't lied. The property operated with hired workers, all freed black people who received wages and lived in modest but dignified homes. There were no slave quarters. There were no whips hanging on the walls. There were no cries of pain echoing through the night. It was disconcerting, as if she had entered an upside-down world. Colonel Whitmore's different, explained Esther, a 50-year-old woman who managed the kitchen. He inherited this land from his father, but he freed all the slaves on the same day as the funeral. It caused a scandal that still reverberates. Half the neighboring farmers don't speak to him. And how does he keep the property profitable? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Esther smiled. Fair wages are more motivating than whips, child. These lands produce less tobacco than the slave plantations, but enough. And the colonel lives modestly, no extravagant balls or racehorses. Sarah absorbed everything but kept her guard up. She had learned that kindness could be a mask. Still, day after day, Nathaniel respected boundaries. He installed her in a spacious room on the second floor, not with him, but in the opposite wing of the house. Locks on the inside. Privacy guaranteed. On the third night, he knocked on her door at 8 o'clock. Miss Claremont, he called formally. May we talk? Sarah opened the door. Nathaniel was in the hallway, holding a stack of books and dresses. Let's begin your transformation, he said, entering only when she nodded. You already know how to read and write. Reverend Patterson taught you well. But we need to refine your speech, your mannerisms, your story. During the following weeks, Graceland became a peculiar school. Every night after dinner, Nathaniel and Sarah would lock themselves in the library. He would teach them high society etiquette, how to hold tea, how to discuss opera and literature, how to waltz. You were born in New Orleans, he repeated the fabricated story. Daughter of Etienne Claremont, a French merchant, and Marguerite, a Creole woman from a wealthy family. Your mother died of yellow fever when you were 15. Your heartbroken father sent you to be educated in a convent in Mexico. He died last year, leaving you alone in the world. You came to Virginia seeking a new life. It's an elaborate story, Sarah commented, practicing her upright posture while balancing a book on her head. It needs to be. People investigate. They ask questions. Nathaniel adjusted the shawl over her shoulders. Your southern accent might pass for New Orleans. The vowels are similar. But you need to add a few French words now and then. Bon, she said with a wry smile. Comme ça? Perfect. Nathaniel smiled too, but his eyes held concern. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something that complicates everything. She stopped, the book falling from her head. What, my cousin Jameson Whitmore is returning from Europe? He's a district court judge and a fanatical defender of slavery. He'll be visiting in 6 weeks. Sarah's blood ran cold. And he can't know, he can't even suspect. Jameson is cunning. If he suspects anything, he'll investigate until he finds the truth. And he'll gleefully destroy us. Sarah sat heavily in a chair. So we have 6 weeks to transform me so completely that I fool even a judge. Impossible. Not impossible. Difficult. But you're the smartest woman I've ever met. Nathaniel knelt beside her chair, his eyes at her level. Sarah, if you want to give up, I can arrange your escape to the north. I have contacts on the Underground Railroad. You'd be in Canada in 2 weeks. And I would stay here. I would face the consequences of buying you and letting you get away. Sarah looked at this man who risked everything for her. There was something about him, a genuine kindness she had thought no longer existed in the world. Or was it dangerous innocence? She wasn't sure yet. I'm not going to run away, she said firmly. We're going to confront your cousin. We're going to prove that Sarah Claremont is real enough to fool anyone. The days grew more intense. Nathaniel discreetly hired a French dressmaker, a secret abolitionist, who created an entire wardrobe for Sarah. Silk dresses, lace gloves, understated but expensive jewelry. You need to look rich, the dressmaker, Madame Beaumont, explained. Society forgives a lot in rich people. Your darker skin, Mediterranean blood, your unfamiliarity with some people. She lived in Mexico, poor thing. Money buys credibility. Nathaniel also invited some carefully selected neighbors to dinner, those with abolitionist leanings, or at least those who were less racist. Each dinner was a test. Charming, my dear Nathaniel, exclaimed Mrs. Elizabeth Hartford, wife of a lawyer, after the third dinner. Miss Claremont has such an exotic grace. And her education, she quoted Rousseau in French. But there were also dangerous moments, Doctor. Benjamin Ashford, a local physician with a morbid interest in phrenology, examined Sarah with invasive eyes. Interesting cranial structure, he commented during dinner. There's a certain ambiguity in the features that suggests distant miscegenation. The silence at the table was sepulchral. Sarah felt panic rising in her throat, but forced a cold smile. Monsieur le Docteur, she said with an exaggerated French accent. In my Creole family, we have Spanish, French, and Italian blood. If you are suggesting that there is ambiguity in that, perhaps you should review your studies of European geography. Nervous laughter. The tension broke. Nathaniel held her hand under the table, a brief but meaningful squeeze. After the guests left, Nathaniel found Sarah on the terrace, shivering despite the night's heat. You were magnificent, he said softly. I was terrified. Her hands were still trembling. One mistake, one wrong word, and ... double quotes, but you were right. You were brilliant, brave, and convincing. Sarah turned to him. In the moonlight, Nathaniel looked younger, more vulnerable. Why are you doing this? The whole truth, Nathaniel. Don't tell me it's just faith or abstract justice. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The truth? During the war against Mexico, my unit captured a village. There were orders to treat the civilians as enemies, women, children. I obeyed, Sarah. I obeyed orders that shame me to this day. Her voice broke. I saw things. I did things. And when I got home, I looked in the mirrors and saw a monster. The faith I professed seemed empty. How could I praise a God of love when I had caused so much suffering? And Sarah pressed, sensing that this confession was crucial. I met Reverend Patterson through a Quaker friend. He took me to a secret meeting where slaves studied the Bible, and there I heard you speak about the God who liberates captives, who transforms pain into redemption. And I thought, here is the answer. I cannot undo the war, but I can fight injustice here. I cannot save everyone, but I can save you. Tears were streaming down Nathaniel's face. No tears he wasn't trying to hide. Does that make me selfish? He asked. Am I saving you or saving myself? Sarah reached out, lightly touching his face, the first voluntary touch she had ever initiated. Maybe both. Maybe redemption works that way. For a moment, they stood there, two broken beings trying to mend themselves through an impossible lie that pointed to a greater truth. Sarah, Nathaniel whispered, are you starting to feel safer here? I'm starting to feel ... something. I don't know if it's security or just less fear. But yes, something is changing. Is this enough to consider our marriage real? Not just a legal charade, but a true commitment? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah recoiled, her heart racing. Are you really asking for my hand in marriage? Not yet. But I'm asking if, when the time comes, you would consider saying yes, not just for survival, but because you choose to be with me. Sarah turned to the night, watching the lights of the workers' huts, free people, sleeping without fear of being sold in the morning. Ask me that question again after we survive your cousin's visit, she finally said. If we're still alive and free, then maybe I can answer. It was a non-answer, but it wasn't a refusal either. Nathaniel nodded, accepting. Then we'll make you so perfect, Sarah Claremont, that even you will begin to believe in her. The weeks flew by. Sarah memorized hundreds of details about her fake life, the convent in Mexico based on a real one Nathaniel had visited, the streets of New Orleans described by a Creole friend, the likes and dislikes of Etienne Claremont, a merchant who had actually existed and died without heirs. Madame Beaumont even managed to obtain an oil painting of an unknown couple, which Nathaniel placed in the room, announcing them as Sarah's parents. You're a master liar, Sarah commented, half admiring, half horrified. I learned from the best politicians and generals, he replied curtly. But there were also moments of genuine joy. Nathaniel taught Sarah to play the piano, his hands guiding hers across the keys. They read poetry at night, debated theology, and laughed at private jokes. You know, Sarah said one night, closing a volume of Wordsworth, in another world, another time, perhaps we could have known each other as equals from the beginning. In this world, in this time, let's pretend to be, Nathaniel replied. And perhaps by pretending long enough, reality will catch up with fantasy. Then the letter arrived. Nathaniel opened it during breakfast, and Sarah saw his face pale. What it was. Jameson is arriving tomorrow, a week earlier than expected. And he's bringing the governor. The plate slipped from Sarah's hands, shattering on the floor. The ultimate test had arrived. The black carriage appeared at noon, drawn by 4 imposing horses. Sarah watched from the second-floor window, her heart pounding so hard she feared it could be heard. She wore her finest dress, dark green silk with cream lace trim, her hair styled in an elaborate French uptoque, courtesy of Madame Beaumont, who had spent the night at Graceland preparing the young lady for society. Breathe, Madame Beaumont whispered beside her. You are Sarah Claremont. You are real. You are noble. Believe it, and they will believe it too. But when Sarah saw the man who stepped down from the carriage, she almost lost her courage. Jameson Whitmore was an older, crueler version of Nathaniel's tall stature, same blue eyes, but where Nathaniel hid kindness, Jameson had calculating coldness. And beside him was Governor William Smith, a burly man of 60, known for having signed more pro-slavery laws than any previous governor. Darling Nathaniel appeared behind her, his voice low and tense. It's time. They descended the stairs together. Sarah forced her hands to remain steady, her spine straight, her face a serene mask of European courtesy. She was Sarah Claremont. She was real Nathaniel. Jameson entered the room with the arrogance of someone who owns the world. 3 years without seeing each other. You seem different, older. Life in the countryside ages a man, Nathaniel replied, embracing his cousin coldly. Governor Smith, it's an unexpected honor. Your cousin insisted I visit his famous slaveless estate, the governor said with heavy sarcasm. I'm curious to see how he survives without the natural order of things, Nathaniel was about to reply when Jameson noticed Sarah standing elegantly near the stairs. And who is this charming lady? His eyes examined her with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. And allow me to introduce Ms. Sarah Claremont, Nathaniel said, his voice controlled. She has been my housekeeper these past few weeks, helping to organize the house. Sarah stepped forward, executing a perfect curtsy, not too deep, which would indicate servility, not too shallow, which would indicate arrogance. Gentlemen, she said, you are welcome to Graceland. Jameson kissed her hand, his eyes never leaving her face. Claremont, a French name. And your appearance is exotic. Where do you come from, mademoiselle? New Orleans, originally, Sarah replied, following a script she'd practiced hundreds of times. But I spent years in Mexico, in a convent. I recently returned after my father's death. New Orleans, Jameson repeated, still holding her hand for an uncomfortably long moment. Fascinating city, full of mixtures. The veiled insult did not go unnoticed. Sarah gently but firmly withdrew her hand. My father always said that New Orleans is where cultures meet to create something more beautiful than any one of them alone, she said with a cold smile. Of course, there are those who fear the beauty that comes from diversity. Nathaniel coughed, suppressing a laugh. The governor frowned. Jameson, however, smiled. The smile of a predator who has found interesting prey, witty. Nathaniel, you found a gem, a governess, you say? That seems like a waste for such talent. Dinner was a psychological battle served over 5 courses. Sarah sat between Nathaniel and the governor, each word a potential landmine. So, Miss Claremont, the governor chewed his roast beef noisily. What does an educated woman think about the slave question? Deadly silence. Nathaniel stiffened. Madame Beaumont, seated discreetly at the end of the table, stopped breathing. Sarah took a sip of wine, buying time. Then she looked directly into the governor's eyes. In Mexico, sir, I saw many forms of labor, peonage, servitude, indigenous slavery. I learned that oppressive systems always justified themselves with elaborate theories about natural order. But Christ ate with fishermen and prostitutes. I think he cared less about natural order than about human souls. A philosophical answer, Jameson interjected softly, dangerously, but not an answer. Do you support slavery or not? I support compassion, Sarah replied. And I leave political debates to men who like to play with human lives like chess pieces. The governor slammed his fist on the table, laughing loudly. She has blood. Nathaniel, this woman is perfect for you. Both of you are impractical idealists. But Jameson didn't laugh. His eyes studied Sarah with the precision of a scientist dissecting a specimen. After dinner, the men retired to the library for cigars and brandia, tradition that excluded women. Sarah went upstairs to her room exhausted, only to find a message scrawled under her door. Side library, midnight, come alone. Jay, her blood ran cold. Jameson wanted to see her alone. Was it a trap? A test? Should she tell Nathaniel? But something in the message, arrogant confidence, told Sarah that Jameson expected her to tell Nathaniel. He was testing their relationship, looking for weaknesses. At midnight, Sarah descended the stairs silently, wearing a dark shawl. The side library was a small room filled with law books, Jameson's domain when he visited. He was waiting, seated in a leather armchair, swirling a glass of cognac. Punctual. I admire that, he said without getting up. Close the door. Sarah hesitated, then closed the door, but stayed close to her. What do you want, Mr. Whitmore? To truth. Jameson took a sip. You're far too refined to simply be a governess. Too polite, far too confident. So what is your real relationship with my cousin? I am exactly what he said. Lies. The word cut through the air like a knife. Nathaniel paid $3,000 for a slave at the Richmond auction 6 weeks ago. $3,000. And then, miraculously, a mysterious Creole governess shows up at his house. Do you think I'm an idiot? Sarah's world crumbled. He knew. Somehow, he knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Jameson stood up, approaching slowly. The question is, are you the slave he bought, dyed, and dressed as a lady? Or did he free that slave, and you are genuinely Sarah Claremont, and there's another explanation? Sarah forced herself to remain still, despite the terror. There are many slaves being sold. What does one have to do with the other? This one, Jameson pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, was called Sarah. Just Sarah. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? Sarah is a common name. True. But describe me. Mahogany skin, 28 years old. Able to recite scripture. Illegally educated by a Methodist pastor. His eyes pierced hers. Take off that makeup and fancy hairstyle, and I imagine you'd look exactly like the description. Sarah felt the world spin. But then something inside her hardened. The same force that had kept her alive through 4 blindfolds and countless horrors. If I were that slave, she said calmly, I wouldn't be stupid enough to stay here talking to a judge who could hang me. I'd be in Canada. Your theory is flattering to my imagination, but insulting to my intelligence. Jameson blinked, surprised by the counteroffensive. Furthermore, Sarah continued, now moving forward, if your cousin had bought a slave to free her, why would he keep her here? Why create this elaborate charade? It makes no sense unless, double quotes, she left the sentence hanging. Unless he has fallen in love with the real Sarah Claremont. And you, being incapable of understanding love that crosses social boundaries, invent conspiracies to explain it. It was a bold, risky move. But Sarah saw hesitation in Jameson's eyes. You're good, he admitted. Very good. But I'll investigate. I'll send telegrams to New Orleans, check records, talk to people. If there's any inconsistency, quotes, there won't be. Sarah said with a confidence she didn't feel. Because I am who I say I am. And now, if you'll excuse me, it's late and inappropriate for us to be alone. She turned to leave, but Jameson grabbed her arm, not violently but firmly. One last thing. If you are who you say you are, you'll prove it by leaving Graceland. A woman of real reputation wouldn't stay in a bachelor pad without a proper chaperone. It's scandalous. Sarah pulled her free arm away. Madame Beaumont is here as a chaperone. And she was planning to leave at the end of the month anyway. My work will be finished. Where will you go? Charleston. I have distant cousins there. Another lie, but Jameson had no way of verifying it immediately. We'll see, he said softly. We'll see. Sarah left the library with trembling legs. In the dark hallway, she found Nathaniel waiting in the shadows. I heard everything, he whispered. There's a secret panel on the wall. Sarah, he knows. He knows. He suspects. But it's not the same as knowing. Sarah held Nathaniel's hands, feeling them as cold as ice, but he'll investigate. We have days, maybe weeks, before he discovers the documents are fake. Then you need to escape. Tonight, I have a train car ready, money, contacts, double quotes. No, Sarah, double quotes. No, Nathaniel. If I run away, he'll know he's right. You'll be destroyed. No, we need to play this game to the end. What game? He's a judge. He has power, resources. And we have the truth, Sarah said, a crazy idea forming in her mind. A different truth, but still true. What are you talking about? Sarah took a deep breath. Marry me tomorrow, in front of Jameson, the governor, everyone. Marry me before he can investigate further. Because once we're married, it will be much harder for him to undo it. And because, double quotes, her voice softened. Because, Nathaniel, I realized something tonight. Looking into the eyes of that man who wants to destroy me. I realized I'd rather die as his wife than live as a fugitive. Nathaniel remained silent for a long moment. Then he knelt right there in the dark hallway, holding her hands. Sarah Claremont, would you do me the honor of being my wife? Not to save me, not to deceive my cousin, but because these last few months have been the happiest of my life. Because you taught me what it means to have courage. Because I love you. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. You're crazy. Absolutely. Do you accept? Yes, Nathaniel Whitmore. I accept. They kissed there in the dark hallway, two conspirators sealing an impossible pact. And somewhere in the house, Jameson Whitmore listened and plotted, unaware that he had just lost the first round of a war that had only just begun. Dawn brought controlled chaos to Graceland. Nathaniel announced during breakfast that he would marry Sarah Claremont that afternoon in an intimate ceremony in the garden. Jameson nearly choked on his coffee. This afternoon, Nathaniel, that's absurd. Weddings take months to plan. When a man finds the right woman, why wait? Nathaniel replied calmly, holding Sarah's hand on the table. Besides, we have the governor here as a witness. What better occasion? Governor Smith, still processing the news, gave a political smile. Well, it's unusual, but romantic. Yes, romantic. Jameson, however, did not smile. Sarah, darling, he said with venomous sweetness, surely you want a proper wedding with your family present, your cousins from Charleston? My cousins are distant, Sarah replied softly, and Nathaniel is my family now. Besides, in the convent, I learned that marriage is about commitment before God, not about showing off. Touched. Jameson could not argue against piety without appearing impious. The following hours were a whirlwind. Madame Beaumont, ever prepared, revealed that she had brought a wedding dress just in case she was too much of an abolitionist not to foresee this possibility. Reverend Thomas, an elderly Methodist pastor who shared Nathaniel's convictions, was summoned urgently. But Jameson didn't stand still. Sarah saw him through the window, sending telegrams from the city. The race had begun. They needed to get married before his investigations revealed the truth. At noon, Sarah was in her room, Madame Beaumont adjusting her white lace dress. Are you sure, child? The elderly Frenchwoman asked softly. Once married, there's no going back. If he finds out the truth and accuses you, you'll be burned at the stake along with Nathaniel. I know. Sarah looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked like a real bride, beautiful, radiant, in love. When had this stopped being a charade and become real? But, Madame, for the first time in my life, I'm choosing not being sold, not being forced, not being used. I'm choosing this man, this risk, this love. Even if it destroys us, at least I will have chosen. Urgent knocking on the door. Esther entered, her face pale. Miss Sarah, Jameson is in the library with a man from New Orleans, an investigator. They're talking about you. Sarah's blood ran cold. So fast. He must have telegraphed last night, even before confronting her. The man traveled all night. Sarah and Madame Beaumont exchanged glances. How much time do we have? This ceremony is scheduled for 3 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock now. 1 hour. 1 hour between freedom and disaster. Sarah went downstairs, still in her wedding dress, straight to the library. She opened the door without knocking. Jameson was sitting with a thin man with rat-like eyes, clearly the investigator. They both turned, surprised. Excuse the interruption, gentlemen, Sarah said with icy serenity, but I heard there's an investigator from New Orleans here. I imagine it's because of me? The investigator, Beauregard LaRue, stood up, removing his hat. Mademoiselle Claremont, or should I say Mademoiselle? Claremont is correct, Sarah interrupted. Mr. LaRue, I presume Mr. Whitmore paid you to investigate my lineage? Just checking facts, ma'am. Nothing personal, sure. So, what did you find out? LaRue looked at Jameson, who nodded. I found that there are no records of Etienne Claremont having a daughter. He died without known heirs. No known heirs, Sarah repeated. Interesting choice of words. Mr. LaRue, my parents never formally married. My mother was Creole, my father French. The relationship was complicated by society. I was his illegitimate daughter. He acknowledged me, raised me, but never formally legitimized me. That's why I don't appear in official records. It was a brilliant twist. It explained the lack of documentation while remaining impossible to completely refute. LaRue frowned. Still, someone should remember you in New Orleans. I was sent to Mexico at 15. I spent 10 years there. How many people remember a Creole bastard girl from a decade ago? Sarah stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. Mr. LaRue, ask your questions. Test my French. Ask about the streets of New Orleans, about the convent in Mexico, but do it to my face, not behind my back. For 20 minutes, LaRue questioned her in French, English, and Spanish. He asked about places in New Orleans, about the architecture of the convent, about Creole customs. Sarah answered everything, thanks to months of preparation, to memories shared by Nathaniel's contacts, and to her own sharp intelligence. Finally, LaRue sat down, defeated. She knows too much to be a complete fraud. She's either genuine or the best imposter I've ever seen. Jameson slammed his fist on the table. That proves nothing. Enough proof for today. A new voice joined the conversation. Governor Smith stood in the doorway, watching. Jameson, you're embarrassing your cousin on his wedding day. If there are irregularities, they will be investigated later. But today, let's celebrate. It was an order, not a request. Jameson, even as a judge, could not openly defy the governor. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Graceland garden was decorated with white flowers, simple yet elegant. The estate workers were gathered, along with a few curious neighbors, drawn by the delightful commotion of such a sudden wedding. Sarah walked down the makeshift aisle in the garden with no father to deliver her, for Sarah Claremont had no living family. Nathaniel waited at the makeshift altar, Reverend Thomas beside him, his Bible open. When Sarah reached Nathaniel and looked into his eyes, something changed inside her. This was no longer an act. It was real, terrifyingly, dangerously real. Beloved, Reverend Thomas began, his voice trembling with emotion. He knew the truth, and he was risking his own life by performing this ceremony. We are gathered before God to unite this man and this woman, ... Double quotes. Sarah barely heard the traditional words. Her mind was racing. She glanced at Jameson, who watched with hawk-like eyes, anticipating any slip-up. She looked at the workers, people Nathaniel had freed, who looked at her with hope and fear. If she and Nathaniel were exposed, they would suffer too. Sarah Claremont, Reverend Thomas said, "You accept this man ... better?" Everyone turned. A man on horseback galloped into the garden, another messenger with papers in his hand. Jameson smiled triumphantly. "More information from New Orleans," the messenger shouted. "About Etienne Claremont." The world stopped. Nathaniel turned pale. Sarah closed her eyes, praying silently. Jameson ripped the papers from his face, reading them quickly. His face went through confusion, then anger, then disbelief. "It can't be ... quotes, what'd he say?" the governor demanded. Jameson read aloud, his voice bitter. Etienne Clermont, a French merchant from New Orleans, maintained a long-standing relationship with Marguerite Dubois, a free Creole woman. Although never formally married, he supported her and a daughter, Sarah, born in 1819. The girl was sent to the convent of Our Lady of Mexico in 1834. Marguerite died of yellow fever in 1837. Etienne died in 1846, leaving his property to, he paused, choking on the words, to Sarah, his illegitimate daughter, in a registered will. Total silence. Sarah opened her eyes slowly, almost in disbelief. The forged documents that Nathaniel had created, had they matched the truth? Or she looked at Nathaniel, who seemed just as shocked as she was. No, he hadn't orchestrated this. So how? ... Reverend Thomas had tears in his eyes, a smile on his face. "The ways of God are mysterious," he whispered. Jameson threw the papers on the floor, furious. This doesn't prove. "There's the slave girl Nathaniel bought. Where is she?" "Freed and sent north," Nathaniel said calmly, the lie flowing smoothly. "The day I bought her. Was that a crime? Using my own money to free someone? It's immoral. It's a betrayal of our society. It's Christianity," Reverend Thomas said firmly. "And if that bothers you, I suggest you re-evaluate your priorities." The governor, scrutinizing the room, began to applaud slowly. Enough interruptions. Reverend continued. Stunned, Reverend Thomas continued, "Sarah Clermont, do you take this man as your lawful husband?" Sarah looked at Nathaniel. She didn't understand how the forged documents had become true. Was it coincidence? Divine providence? Magic? But at that moment, it didn't matter. "I accept," she said, and every word was true. "Nathaniel Whitmore, do you accept this woman? ... Accepted." Without hesitation. "Therefore, by the authority vested in me and before God and these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Nathaniel kissed Sarah, and the garden erupted in applause. But Sarah saw Jameson storming out, his face contorted with rage. This wasn't over. She knew it. He wouldn't give up. But for today, for this stolen moment, Sarah was free. She was loved. She was Sarah Whitmore. And perhaps, just perhaps, God really did transform lies into truths when they served justice. 3 months of marriage had passed like a fever dream. Sarah Whitmore, the name sounded strange and wonderful, found herself genuinely happy for the first time in her life. Nathaniel was kind, respectful, passionate. They had transformed Graceland into a secret stop on the Underground Railroad, helping dozens of runaway slaves reach the north. But happiness came at a price. Jameson hadn't given up. He had become obsessed, hiring more investigators, questioning every neighbor, every visitor. And on a cold January morning in 1848, he finally found what he was looking for, the auctioneer from Richmond. The man remembered Sarah not as Sarah Clermont, but as Sarah, the literate slave whom Nathaniel had bought for $3,000. "She is the same woman," the auctioneer declared at an impromptu hearing Jameson convened in Richmond. "I would recognize those eyes anywhere. Colonel Whitmore bought a slave and married her. It's miscegenation, it's a crime." The news spread like wildfire. Within a week, newspapers across Virginia were publishing the story. Colonel Mary's slave in disguise scandal shakes Virginian society. Nathaniel and Sarah were summoned to trial. Jameson, as judge, would preside personally. The verdict was predictable. Annulment of the marriage, re-enslavement of Sarah, imprisonment of Nathaniel for fraud, and perhaps hanging for racial treason. The night before the trial, Sarah and Nathaniel were in the Graceland Library. Fireworks could be seen in the distance, angry mobs burning effigies of them in Richmond. "There's still time," Nathaniel said for the 100th time. "I have horses ready, money, we can be in Canada in 10 days and leave all those we helped behind? Sarah pointed to the window where 3 families of runaway slaves were hiding in the barn. If we run away, Jameson will find them. He'll use them against us. So what do? Sarah took a deep breath. We told the truth. The whole truth. Sarah, this is suicide, or its testimony. She held his hands. Nathaniel, for months, we've lived a lie to expose a greater truth. But the time has come to stop hiding. If we're going to die, let it be by telling the truth about this rotten system. They're going to kill you. They're going to hang me, perhaps. Or perhaps our story will plant seeds that will one day grow into trees of freedom. Sarah touched his face. You taught me that faith means trusting even when we don't see the way. So let's have faith. The courtroom was packed. It seemed as if all of Virginia had come to watch the show. Jameson sat triumphantly in the judge's dock. The prosecutor, a ruthless man named Silas Hargrove, was prepared to destroy them. Colonel Whitmore, Hargrove began, "Did you buy a slave named Sarah last April for $3,000? I bought it, Nathaniel admitted. Shocked murmurs in the courtroom. And this slave, Hargrove pointed at Sarah, is the same woman you married, falsely presented as Sarah Claremont? Nathaniel looked at Sarah. She nodded. Yes, he said. It's the same woman. The courtroom erupted. Jameson banged the gavel, smiling victoriously. Order, Colonel Whitmore. Do you admit to fraud, miscegenation, and contempt of Virginia law? I admit to having married Sarah, Nathaniel said firmly, but I don't admit that loving someone is a crime. To her, Nathaniel said firmly, but I don't admit that loving that like to her How can I then accept a system that treats human beings as property? You're not here to philosophize, Jameson shouted. But I need to. Nathaniel turned to the audience. Look at this woman. Sarah is smarter than half the men in this room. She quotes scripture, speaks 3 languages, has more dignity in her little finger than this entire courtroom combined. And you want to enslave her because her skin is a different color? Enough. Jameson banged his gavel furiously. Miss Sarah, do you have anything to say in your defense? Sarah stood up slowly. She wore a simple dress, not the silks of Sarah Claremont, but not the rags of a slave either. Something in between, something real. Gentlemen, she began, her voice clear and firm, you see me as a slave, as property, as less than human. But I'm going to tell you a story. And she told her story. She told her story about her mother, sold when Sarah was 7 years old, about learning to read in secret, risking beatings, about Reverend Patterson, hanged for teaching the true gospel, about being sold 4 times, used, abused, dehumanized. But something inside me refused to break, she said, tears streaming down her face. Because I knew, somewhere deep inside, that God saw me as a daughter, not as a slave, as a daughter. She looked around the courtroom. Some men avoided her gaze. Some women wept silently. When Nathaniel bought me at that auction, I thought he was just another master. But he did something no one else had done. He saw me. He really saw me as a person, as an equal, as a human being. Emotional narratives don't change laws, Hargrove shouted. No, Sarah agreed, but they expose their injustice. Do you want to re-enslave me? Do you want to hang my husband? Go ahead. But know that every drop of blood you spill will testify against this evil system. And one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but one day, those chains will be broken, and people will look back and see you on the wrong side of history. Absolute silence in the courtroom. Then, surprisingly, someone began to applaud. An elderly woman in the gallery, then another person, and another. Jameson banged the gavel. Order! Order! Anyone who applauds will be removed. But something had changed. Sarah had touched something in some hearts, not all, perhaps not even most, but in some. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses were called. The auctioneer confirmed Sarah's identity. Documents were presented. Nathaniel's defense was legally weak. He had, in fact, broken the law. Finally, Jameson prepared to pronounce his sentence. His face was red with anger and something else. Shame, Nathaniel Whitmore, he said, you are guilty of fraud, miscegenation, and contempt of the laws of this Commonwealth. The sentence is double quotes. The courthouse door burst open. A man rushed in, a telegraph messenger. Excuse me, Your Excellency, but there is urgent news from Washington? Jameson snatched the telegram and read it. His face paled. What is it? The prosecutor demanded. Jameson read aloud, his voice hollow. President Polk yesterday signed an executive order condemning the treatment of Mexican prisoners of war. Investigations into atrocities committed by American forces are underway. Colonels and officers responsible for crimes against civilians will be prosecuted. He stopped, looking at Nathaniel. They both knew what this was about. The village, the orders, the terrible things that had happened. Nathaniel stood up. Your Excellency, if I am to be judged for my sins, let it be for those I have truly committed. In the war, I followed orders that shamed me. I did things that stain my soul. If there is a crime for which I must pay, it is that, not the crime of loving my wife. Jameson looked at Nathaniel, then at Sarah, then at the crowded courtroom. For the first time in his life, he found himself caught between law and justice, and they weren't the same thing. This court, he said slowly, has no jurisdiction over war crimes. that this matter will be dealt with in Washington. As for the present case, double quotes, he paused, struggling with himself. Your Excellency, the prosecutor pressed. Technically, Jameson said, each word costing him dearly, the marriage was performed with documents that, according to investigations, proved to be partially true. Sarah Claremont exists in the records. She is the illegitimate daughter of a French merchant. Her racial identity is ... ambiguous. But the auctioneer ... auctioneer may be confusing too. Different women named Sarah Jameson interrupted. Mistakes happen. The courtroom erupted in confusion. What was Jameson doing? Therefore, he continued, banging the gavel, for lack of conclusive evidence, this court cannot annul the marriage. The case is dismissed. Total chaos. Hargrove protested furiously. Half the courtroom booed, the other half applauded. And Sarah and Nathaniel stood paralyzed, unable to believe it. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, Sarah found Jameson leaving through a side door. Why? She asked. He stopped, without looking at her. Because you were right about being on the wrong side of history. And because ... double quotes, he finally turned, unexpected tears in his eyes, because I also have a bastard daughter in New Orleans with a Creole woman. And if anyone tried to separate them like that, ... I would become a monster to stop it. Sarah was speechless. But make no mistake, Jameson continued, his voice hardening. I didn't do this out of kindness. I did it out of pragmatism. This war that's coming between North and South will destroy everything. And when it's over, people like you will win. I'm simply choosing not to be destroyed in the process. He left, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. It was 1863. The Civil War was tearing America in two. Graceland had become a hospital for wounded soldiers, both sides, because Sarah and Nathaniel refused to choose between human lives. Nathaniel's hair was gray now, marked by physical and emotional scars from the war and the war crimes trials in Washington, of which he was eventually acquitted, but never forgave himself. Sarah worked tirelessly, healing the wounded, teaching runaway slaves to read, and preaching in home worship services about a God of freedom. Mamie, a 12-year-old girl, Marguerite, named after Sarah's mother, ran toward her. More soldiers are coming? Sarah looked down the road. More broken men who needed healing. Do you regret it? Nathaniel asked softly, coming to her side. Try again, R, continues Sarah. Thought of everything. The auction, the lies, the trial, the years of struggle. She thought of the 40 people she had helped escape, the 100 slaves she had taught to read, the lives they had touched. Not a second, she said, holding his hand. Not a single second. Together, they walked towards the wounded soldiers, ready to heal, love, and fight for justice for one more day. Because that's what it means to have faith. Not knowing how the story ends, but trusting that the one who writes it is good. Did this story touch you? Did it make you think about courage, faith, and justice? Then subscribe to the channel for more real and inspiring stories that defy the impossible and show that love can break even the cruelest chains. Activate the bell so you don't miss any episodes of stories of faith and courage. Leave a comment below. Would you have had the courage of Nathaniel and Sarah? Share your thoughts. Until the next story that will transform your heart.